What happens when the most powerful man in New York watches his wife get humiliated and no one knows who he really is? Tonight, you'll witness a story of invisible power, silent revenge, and justice served cold. A waitress, a billionaire's son. One moment of cruelty that will bring an empire to its knees. Before we begin, I invite you to stay until the very end, because what starts as humiliation will become the most satisfying takedown you've ever seen. Hit that like button and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The crystal chandeliers of the Astoria Grand Ballroom cast diamonds of light across marble floors, so polished you could see your soul reflected back at you if you bothered to look down. But nobody in this room ever looked down. Not at the floors, not at the staff, and certainly not at people like Elena Cruz. She moved through the crowd like a shadow-given form, her black vest and white shirt the uniform of invisibility. Her dark hair pulled back tight, not a strand out of place. Her movements efficient, practiced, nearly silent. In her left hand, a tray of champagne flutes, each one worth more than her monthly rent. In her right, the kind of smile that had been trained into her over 3 years of working Manhattan's elite events. Smile. Nod. Don't make eye contact unless spoken to. Refill before they ask. Disappear before they remember you exist. Champagne, sir. The man in the Armani tuxedo didn't even glance her direction, just plucked a glass from her tray mid-conversation, his hand adorned with a watch that could have paid off her student loans. She was already moving away before he could change his mind about acknowledging her. The Vandermeer Annual Charity Gala, though calling it charity was generous. It was a peacocking exhibition where Manhattan's upper crust gathered to congratulate themselves on their success while pretending to care about causes they couldn't pronounce. $2,000 a plate. 500 guests. $1 million raised for urban youth initiatives that would fund exactly one basketball court and a tax write-off. Elena had worked dozens of these events. She knew the rhythm, the flow, the unspoken rules. Stay near the walls, keep the trays full, watch for the signals, a raised finger, an empty glass, a wandering eye looking for service. She was good at being invisible. She had to be. Can you believe the Rothstein portfolio? A woman's voice, sharp with judgment and champagne, cut through the string quartet's Vivaldi. Absolutely tanked. I heard Margaret had to sell the Hamptons house. Darling, the Hamptons house was just the beginning, her companion replied, dripping with false sympathy. They're saying Gregory might have to actually work for a living. Laughter, cruel and careless. Elena refilled their glasses without being asked, perfectly timed, invisible hands performing invisible labor. They didn't pause their conversation, didn't say thank you. The woman adjusted her Cartier bracelet, worth 6 months of Elena's salary, and continued eviscerating the Rothsteins' misfortune with the enthusiasm of someone who'd never known real hardship. The ballroom was a cathedral to excess. Ice sculptures depicting Greek gods melted slowly near tables laden with beluga caviar and Kobe beef. The auction items displayed on the stage included a weekend in Monaco, a private concert with a Grammy winner, and a priceless Fabergé egg that was probably worth more than Elena would earn in her lifetime. She made her way back toward the kitchen, her tray empty, her feet aching in the sensible black flats required by the catering company. The double doors swung open, revealing the controlled chaos of the service area, a sharp contrast to the serene elegance of the ballroom. Elena, table 17 needs a refresh, and the Hendersons are asking for the 67 Chateau Margaux. Marcus, the floor manager, barely looked up from his clipboard, his headset crackling with updates from the kitchen staff. On it, she loaded fresh glasses, checked her appearance in the polished steel of the prep counter, presentable, forgettable, perfect, and headed back through the doors. The thing about being invisible was that you saw everything. Elena had watched marriages crumble over whispered confrontations near the coat check. She'd seen business deals made and broken over handshakes and subtle nods. She'd observed affairs bloom and die within the span of a single gala, all while carrying trays and refreshing drinks. She knew secrets these people would pay millions to keep quiet. Not that she'd ever tell. That wasn't her place. Her place was to serve, to smile, to survive, to take home her paycheck, $18 an hour plus a cut of the pooled tips, and to save every dollar she could toward the dream of something better. Maybe night classes, Maybe her own restaurant someday, something small and warm and real, where people actually saw each other. Excuse me, miss? Elena turned, her professional smile already in place. The woman addressing her wore a gown that probably cost more than Elena's car, a deep emerald silk that complemented diamond earrings the size of grapes. Yes, ma'am? Is this champagne French? I specifically requested French champagne. This tastes domestic. The woman's nose wrinkled as if the very concept offended her. It was French. Dom Perignon, 2008. Elena had watched the sommelier uncork it herself. It's Dom Perignon, ma'am. 2008 vintage, French. Elena kept her voice even, pleasant, helpful. The woman took another sip, considering. I suppose it's acceptable, though last year's gala had the 2004. This is clearly a downgrade. I'll let the event coordinator know your feedback, ma'am. The woman had already turned away, dismissing Elena's existence as easily as she'd summoned it. Breathe, smile, move on. The night progressed in its predictable rhythm. Dinner was served, a 7-course meal that most guests picked at, more interested in being seen than in eating. Elena and the other servers navigated the spaces between tables with choreographed precision, removing plates, refilling wine, maintaining the illusion of effortless abundance. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC's voice boomed over the sound system. If I could direct your attention to the stage, we're about to begin this evening's auction. I promise you, we have some truly extraordinary items available tonight, all for excellent causes. The crowd shifted, attention focusing forward. Elena used the moment to clear table 9, stacking plates with practiced efficiency. That's when she first noticed him. Victor Hale stood near the bar, surrounded by a constellation of admirers, each one orbiting his wealth and status. He was 28, handsome in the way that expensive grooming and better genetics could produce, with the kind of casual arrogance that came from never hearing the word no. The Hale family owned half of Manhattan's commercial real estate and most of its new development projects. Victor's father, Charles Hale, was on the Forbes list. Victor himself was famous for nothing except being born rich and staying that way. His social media filled with pictures of yachts and nightclubs and models whose names he probably didn't remember. He was also visibly drunk. $20,000 for the Monaco package, someone called from the crowd. $25,000. Another bidder, competitive and eager. Elena moved along the periphery, heading back toward the kitchen with her loaded tray. She'd learned to sense trouble the way sailors learn to read weather, and right now, every instinct told her to get clear of Victor Hale's orbit. She wasn't fast enough. Hey, you! Victor's voice, slurred at the edges, called out across the space between them. Elena pretended not to hear, continuing her trajectory toward the kitchen doors. Hey, waitress! Louder now, annoyed at being ignored. She had no choice. She stopped, turned, arranged her face into pleasant neutrality. Yes, sir. Can I help you? He stumbled slightly as he approached, his friends following like remoras trailing a shark. Up close, she could smell the expensive scotch on his breath, see the glassy shine in his eyes. You can help me by answering when I call you. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. What's your name? Every alarm bell in Elena's head was ringing. Elena, sir, is there something you need? Elena, he repeated, making a show of tasting the syllables. His friends laughed, though nothing funny had been said. Pretty name. You know what I need, Elena? I'm happy to get you another drink, sir, or I need people to do their jobs right. He grabbed a glass from her tray, examined it with exaggerated scrutiny. This has a smudge. You see that? A smudge. The glass was spotless. Elena had checked them herself. I apologize, sir. Let me get you a fresh one. You know what your problem is? Victor stepped closer, invading her space, using his height to intimidate. People like you don't take pride in your work. You just coast. Do the minimum. Probably think you deserve a medal just for showing up. Elena's jaw tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. Around them, conversations had started to pause. People were noticing, watching. Sir, I assure you, I take my work very seriously. If you'll excuse me, I'll get you... I'm not finished talking to you. His voice rose, performance mixing with genuine aggression. You know how much my family paid for this event? How much we donate to keep places like this running, and you can't even serve a clean glass? The glass is clean, sir. The words came out before she could stop them, quiet but firm. Wrong move. Victor's face darkened. His friends went silent, sensing the shift from entertainment to something uglier. The nearby tables had stopped pretending not to watch. Did you just talk back to me? No, sir. I simply... You know what I think? Victor reached for the soda water on a nearby table, someone else's drink, he didn't care, and held it up. I think you need a lesson in humility. Elena saw it coming. Had maybe half a second to react. Not enough time to step back, to dodge, to do anything but stand there as Victor Hale, son of billionaires, prince of Manhattan real estate, upended the entire glass over her head. The liquid was cold. Shockingly cold. It soaked through her hair, her collar, ran down her face and neck, drenched her vest and shirt. Ice cubes hit her shoulder, her chest, clattered to the marble floor. The ballroom went silent, not the natural silence of paused conversations, but the heavy, awful silence of a room full of people watching something terrible happen and choosing to do nothing. Elena stood frozen, soda water dripping from her chin, her hands still gripping the tray. Her eyes stung. From the carbonation or the humiliation, she couldn't tell. Her whole body wanted to shake, to react, to scream or cry or throw the tray at Victor's smug face. She did none of those things, because she couldn't afford to. There, Victor's voice carried across the silence, satisfied and cruel. Maybe that'll teach you some respect. His friends laughed, nervous and eager, desperate to signal that they thought this was funny, that they were on the right side of power. Someone in the crowd giggled. Others looked away, suddenly fascinated by their auction programs. Elena's supervisor materialized from nowhere, his face professionally blank, but his eyes apologetic. Miss Cruz, please head to the back. I'll handle this. She wanted to say something, wanted to defend herself, to point out that the glass wasn't smudged, that she'd done nothing wrong, that Victor Hale was a drunk bully with more money than humanity. But she was outnumbered, outmatched, and out of options. So she did what she'd been trained to do, what survival demanded. She lowered her eyes, turned, and walked toward the kitchen doors with as much dignity as someone dripping with soda water could manage. Her shoes squelched slightly with each step. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her back, could imagine the whispers starting already. Did you see that? Poor girl. Well, she must have done something. Victor Hale doesn't just... Still, she should have known better than to... The kitchen doors closed behind her, muffling the rising wave of conversation as the gala moved on, the moment already being filed away as minor entertainment, a story to tell at brunch. Elena made it to the staff bathroom before her hands started shaking. She locked the door, set the tray down carefully. Even now, even in this moment, she couldn't break the dishes, couldn't give them another reason to criticize her, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her makeup was ruined, mascara bleeding dark tracks down her cheeks. Her hair hung in wet strands. Her white shirt was plastered to her skin, nearly transparent. She looked exactly how she felt. Small, powerless, humiliated. The tears came then, hot and bitter, mixing with the soda water still dripping from her chin. She'd done everything right. Kept her head down, done her job, followed every rule, and it hadn't mattered. Because to people like Victor Hale, she wasn't a person. She was a thing, a prop. A target for casual cruelty when he needed to feel big in front of his friends. And everyone had watched. Hundreds of people, including some who'd smiled at her earlier when she'd refilled their drinks, who'd thanked her politely, who'd seemed like decent human beings. All of them had watched. None of them had helped. Elena pressed her palms against the sink, focusing on the cold porcelain, on her breathing, on anything except the memory of Victor's face as he'd poured that glass. The satisfaction in his eyes, the laughter of his friends. A knock at the door made her jump. Elena? Honey, it's Sarah. One of the other servers, a middle-aged woman who'd been working these events for 15 years. Marcus sent me to check on you. You okay? Elena wiped her eyes, tried to compose herself. I'm fine. No, you're not, and you don't have to be. A pause. Listen, Marcus is dealing with it. He's trying. You want me to get your stuff? You can clock out early. No one would blame you. Clock out early meant losing hours, losing money, losing the chance to make rent this month without dipping into her carefully hoarded savings. I'm coming back out. Elena, I need the hours, Sarah. I can't afford to leave. She splashed water on her face, did what she could to fix her makeup, wrung out her hair. The shirt was hopeless, but she had a spare in her locker. Give me 5 minutes. She changed shirts, fixed her appearance as best she could, and returned to the ballroom. Her section had been reassigned, a small mercy from Marcus, so she worked the opposite end of the room as far from Victor Hale as the space allowed. But she could still hear him, still hear the laughter, the congratulations on his successful bid for the Monaco package, the easy camaraderie of people for whom cruelty was just another form of entertainment. The rest of the night blurred together. She served drinks, cleared plates, smiled at people who either didn't know what had happened or didn't care. At one point, an older woman with kind eyes pressed a $50 bill into her hand and whispered, "I'm sorry, dear." But that was it. That was the extent of the solidarity offered. When the gala finally ended, when the last guest had collected their coat and the last table had been cleared, Elena helped break down the service area in numb autopilot. The tips were pooled and divided. Her share came to $127. Not bad for a night's work, not worth the humiliation, but then what was? She changed in the staff locker room, packed her things, and walked out into the Manhattan night. It was past midnight, the streets still buzzing with the city's restless energy. Taxis honked, late-night restaurants glowed. People stumbled out of bars laughing at jokes she couldn't hear. Elena pulled her jacket tighter and started the walk to the subway. Her phone buzzed. A text from her husband. How was work? She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She could tell him, should tell him, but the thought of reliving it, of explaining what had happened, of seeing the anger and helplessness in his eyes because there was nothing he could do. Fine. Long night. Home soon. She hit send before she could reconsider, then silenced her phone and descended into the subway station. The platform was nearly empty at this hour, just a few scattered souls waiting for the late train. Elena sat on a bench, her bag clutched in her lap, and tried not to think about Victor Hale's face, about the soda water, about the silence. But it played on repeat anyway, a loop she couldn't escape. Maybe that'll teach you some respect. The train arrived in a rush of wind and grinding metal. Elena boarded, found a seat, and stared at her reflection in the dark window as the city blurred past. 32 years old. Bachelor's degree in hospitality management from a state school she'd paid for herself with loans she was still paying off. 3 years serving Manhattan's elite at galas and fundraisers and corporate events, smart enough to know she deserved better. Practical enough to know that deserving and getting were different things. She'd grown up in Queens, daughter of immigrants who'd worked themselves to exhaustion to give her opportunities they'd never had. Her mother cleaned houses. Her father drove a taxi. They'd been so proud when she graduated college, so certain it meant she'd escaped the kind of work that broke your body and ignored your dignity. They didn't know she was still doing exactly that work, just with a fancier uniform. The train rocked and swayed, carrying her home to the small apartment in Astoria she shared with Adrian. He'd be waiting up for her despite the late hour. He always did on gala nights, knew she came home exhausted and wired, needing to decompress. Adrian Voss. Her husband of 2 years, though they'd been together for 5. They'd met at a community center where she'd been volunteering to teach cooking classes, and he'd been overseeing a renovation project. He was quiet, methodical, kind in a way that didn't announce itself. He worked in construction, project management, site supervision, the kind of work that required intelligence and skill, but didn't come with respect or prestige. They were a good match, both working class, both pragmatic, both understanding that love didn't mean grand gestures or fairy tale endings. It meant showing up, supporting each other, building something stable in an unstable world. She hadn't told him much about the gala circuit, about the casual indignities and small humiliations that were just part of the job. What was the point? He had his own frustrations, his own battles with clients who treated construction workers like furniture, his own stories of disrespect. They managed. They survived. They were saving for something better. That was enough. Had to be enough. The train pulled into her stop. Elena gathered her things and climbed the stairs to street level, emerging into her neighborhood's familiar landscape. The bodega on the corner was still open, its neon sign flickering. A group of teenagers sat on the stoop of a brownstone, laughing at something on a phone. Normal life, continuing as if nothing had happened, because for everyone else, nothing had. Her building was a walk-up, 4 floors of aging brick and grudging plumbing. Elena climbed the stairs slowly, her feet protesting every step. At the 3rd floor landing, she paused, composing herself. Adrian couldn't know. She wouldn't burden him with this. It was over, done, already fading into the past. She could handle it. She unlocked the apartment door as quietly as possible, hoping maybe he'd fallen asleep despite his usual vigil. No such luck. Adrian sat at their small kitchen table, paperwork spread before him, a cup of tea going cold at his elbow. He looked up as she entered, and his face, God, his face immediately registered concern. "Hey!" He stood, crossing to her in 3 strides. "You okay? You look exhausted." "Long night." She forced a smile, set down her bag, shrugged out of her jacket. "You didn't have to wait up." "Wanted to." His eyes scanned her face, reading the signs she thought she'd hidden. "Elena, what happened?" "Nothing. Just a difficult event. Rich people being rich people." She moved toward the bedroom, desperate to change clothes, to shower, to wash the night away. "I'm fine, really. Just tired." His hand caught her wrist gently. "Talk to me." And there it was, the kindness she'd married him for, the quiet strength that made her feel safe, the part of her that wanted to collapse into his arms and tell him everything warred with the part that wanted to protect him from her pain. Protection won. "Really, Adrian, I'm okay. Just exhausted. Can we talk in the morning?" She squeezed his hand, kissed his cheek. "I need a shower and about 12 hours of sleep." He studied her for a long moment, clearly unconvinced, but he nodded. "Okay, but Elena, whatever it is, whenever you're ready, I'm here." "I know." She meant it. "Thank you." In the shower, she finally let herself cry again, the water mixing with tears, washing away the soda and the makeup and the pretense. She stood under the spray until it ran cold, until she was shivering and numb and clean. When she emerged, Adrian was in bed reading on his tablet. He set it aside as she climbed in next to him, gathered her into his arms without a word, just held her, his heartbeat steady against her ear, his presence solid and real. Elena closed her eyes and tried to sleep, tried to forget, tried to convince herself that tomorrow would be better, that the humiliation would fade, that Victor Hale would never think about her again, and she could return the favor. She almost believed it. What Elena didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that 3 tables away from where Victor Hale had humiliated her, a man in an understated suit had witnessed everything. James Chen had been Charles Hale's personal attorney for 7 years. He attended these galas as a professional courtesy, networking and observing, keeping his finger on the pulse of Manhattan's elite. He knew everyone worth knowing and most of their secrets. He'd watched Victor's performance with growing disgust. He'd seen the cruelty, the entitlement, the casual destruction of another person's dignity. He'd waited, hoping someone would intervene. No one had. And James Chen had a problem with that. Because 3 months ago, he'd been hired for a side project by a man who preferred to work behind the scenes. A man who'd asked James to keep an eye on certain people, certain situations, certain opportunities. A man who'd been very clear about his values: respect, dignity, justice, especially for those who couldn't fight for themselves. James had liked that about his new client, had appreciated working for someone who saw the world clearly, who understood that power wasn't just about money, but about how you used it. Now, sitting in his car in the parking garage beneath the Astoria Grand, James pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd been given for emergencies. It rang 3 times before a calm, measured voice answered. "James, it's late." "I know, sir. I'm sorry. But I thought you should know there's been an incident involving your wife." A pause. The kind of silence that wasn't empty, but full, compressed with sudden attention and controlled emotion. "Explain." James did, recounting every detail he'd witnessed: the confrontation, the humiliation, the soda water, the silence of 400 people who'd chosen not to see. When he finished, the silence stretched longer. Finally, "You're certain it was Elena?" "Positive, sir. I recognized her from the photo you provided. I'm very sorry. I should have intervened. This wasn't your responsibility to prevent, James. The voice remained calm, almost eerily so. But I appreciate you telling me. Do you have details on the man who did this? Victor Hale, son of Charles Hale, Hale Development and Properties. I can send you a full brief by morning. No need. I know the Hales. A pause. James, I want you to do something for me. I want you to compile everything, every financial holding, every business connection, every debt and asset the Hale family controls. I want to know every thread in their web. Sir, that will take... I'll pay triple your usual rate. And James, this is priority one. Drop everything else. Understood. May I ask what you're planning? Justice, James. I'm planning justice. The line went dead. James Chen sat in his car, staring at his phone, feeling the first tremors of what was about to unfold. He'd worked with powerful men before, knew the difference between bluster and real threat. This was real. He made another call, this one to his research team. I need everything on the Hale family empire. Everything, and I need it yesterday. Then he started the car and drove into the Manhattan night, already mentally cataloging the Hale's vulnerabilities. It was going to be a long week for them. At the same moment, in a different car idling 3 blocks from the Astoria Grand, someone else had witnessed Victor Hale's performance. Not in person, but through different eyes. Marcus, the floor manager who'd sent Elena to the back, who'd apologized with his eyes but not his voice, who'd hated himself for choosing his job over doing the right thing. Marcus had seen everything. And Marcus had a cousin who worked in video production, who'd been hired to capture B-roll footage of the gala for the event organizers, who'd had 3 cameras running all night. Marcus made a call. Hey, Tony? Yeah, it's me. Listen, about tonight, did your cameras catch the incident with the waitress? The one with the Hale kid? Dude, I got the whole thing, crystal clear. Why? Can you send me a copy before you give anything to the client? Marcus, I don't know if I should... Tony, please. That girl didn't deserve what happened. She's got a husband, she's good people, and everyone just watched while that rich bastard humiliated her. Someone should have the truth. A long pause. Yeah, okay. But you didn't get this from me. Never did. 10 minutes later, Marcus had the video file on his phone. High definition, perfectly framed, showing exactly what had happened and who had let it happen. He watched it once, his jaw tightening at Victor's smirk, at the crowd's complicit silence. Then he opened his messaging app and did something he'd never done before. He found Elena's contact information from the company database and sent her the video with a simple message. I'm sorry I didn't speak up, but maybe this can help. If you want to use it, use it. You didn't deserve that. He hit send before he could reconsider, then deleted the video from his phone and tried to convince himself he'd done something right, even if it was too late. Elena's phone buzzed on the nightstand, but she didn't hear it. She was already asleep, exhausted and dreamless, unaware that the night's events had set in motion something far larger than she could imagine. Unaware that her husband, the quiet construction contractor she thought she knew, was no longer in bed beside her. Adrian Voss stood in his home office, a room Elena rarely entered because it was just boring work stuff, looking at 2 monitors that showed things far more complex than construction schedules. On the left screen, the video Marcus had sent Elena, forwarded automatically to Adrian's phone through a security protocol she didn't know existed. He'd watched it 4 times now, each viewing making his jaw tighten further, his eyes grow colder. On the right screen, preliminary data on Hale Development and Properties, pulled from databases he'd built over 15 years of very careful work. Adrian wasn't just a construction contractor. He was the construction contractor, the one whose company had built half of Manhattan's new skyline, who held leveraged positions in 36 major projects, whose network of contractors and suppliers and permits and inspections formed an invisible web throughout the city's development infrastructure. But he preferred people not knowing that, preferred being underestimated. It made the work cleaner. He picked up his phone and made a call. It was answered immediately despite the late hour. Sir? Michael, we have a problem. The Hale family. What kind of problem? The personal kind. I need you to activate Protocol 7. A sharp intake of breath. Sir, Protocol 7 that's complete economic isolation. Are you certain? I just watched a spoiled child pour soda water over my wife's head while 400 people laughed. Adrian's voice was quiet, controlled, and absolutely lethal. I'm very certain. Understood. Timeline? 72 hours. I want them feeling it before they understand what's happening. By the time they figure out the source, I want them desperate. Consider it done. Adrian ended the call and returned his attention to the screens. He'd built his empire on patience, precision, and understanding that real power wasn't about being seen, it was about controlling what others couldn't see. The Hales were visible, famous, proud of their wealth and status. They had no idea how fragile that visibility made them. He opened a new file, began making notes, planning the choreography of what would come next. This wasn't revenge. Revenge was emotional, messy, imprecise. This was correction. An adjustment to a system that had allowed his wife to be humiliated while the powerful applauded. He worked through the night, assembling the pieces, checking connections, ensuring every move would flow seamlessly into the next. By dawn, he had a complete picture. The Hales would fall. They just didn't know it yet. As the sun began to rise over Manhattan, painting the skyline in shades of gold and shadow, Adrian finally returned to bed. Elena was still sleeping, her face peaceful in the early morning light. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, his touch gentle. "You didn't deserve that," he whispered. "And they're going to learn exactly what that means." Then he closed his eyes and slept for exactly 3 hours, the precise amount he'd trained himself to function on when necessary. When he woke, the war would begin, and Victor Hale, drunk on champagne and his own untouchable privilege, had no idea that his world had just 96 hours left before it started crumbling. The invisible woman had an invisible guardian, and he'd just been given a reason to become very, very visible. The coffee was too hot, but Charles Hale drank it anyway, scalding his tongue as he stared at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office. 63 stories above Manhattan, the city spread beneath him like a kingdom he'd spent 40 years building. From here, the people looked like ants, the traffic like blood cells moving through concrete arteries. He liked it that way. Distance gave perspective. Power required elevation. His phone buzzed, the fourth time in 10 minutes. He ignored it, savoring the moment of peace before the chaos of another day. Charles Hale hadn't built an empire by being reactive. He was methodical, strategic, patient. While other developers chased trends, he built foundations. While they leveraged themselves into oblivion during boom times, he maintained liquidity. While they panicked during downturns, he bought their assets for pennies on the dollar. Hale Development and Properties wasn't just successful, it was inevitable. 32 major projects across Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. A portfolio worth north of $8 billion. Political connections that ran from City Hall to the governor's mansion. The kind of institutional power that didn't just weather storms, but created them for competitors. The phone buzzed again. Charles sighed and picked it up. His assistant, Margaret, sounded uncharacteristically flustered. "Mr. Hale, I'm sorry to bother you so early, but we have a situation. The concrete delivery for the Hudson Yards expansion. They're saying there's been a scheduling conflict. They can't deliver today." "Then they deliver tomorrow. What's the problem?" "Sir, they can't deliver tomorrow either, or this week. They're saying something about supply chain issues and contractual obligations to other projects. I've called 3 other suppliers, and they're all saying the same thing." Charles set down his coffee, a small thread of concern weaving through his morning calm. "All of them? That's unusual." "Yes, sir. And that's not all. I just got off the phone with the permits office. They're saying there's a clerical error with our Williamsburg development. They need to review the entire application again." "What kind of clerical error?" "They won't specify, just that it needs review. It could take weeks." Now Charles was fully alert. 2 problems before 9 a.m. was coincidence. 3 would be a pattern. "What else?" Margaret hesitated. "The electrical contractor for the Queens project just pulled out, said they're overextended and can't meet our timeline. And the bank called about the credit line for the—" "Stop." Charles stood, his reflection in the window sharp and commanding. Silver hair, tailored suit, the posture of a man who'd never learned to bend. "Get David in my office, now. And I want a full status report on every active project within the hour." "Yes, sir." He ended the call and immediately dialed his son. Victor answered on the fourth ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Dad, it's 8 in the morning. Are you still in bed? I got in late. The Vandermeer thing ran long." Charles felt a familiar spike of irritation. Victor was 28 years old, heir to an empire, and still acted like a fraternity president on permanent spring break. How did it go? Fine. Boring, mostly. Same people, same conversations. I won the Monaco package, though. Thought I'd take Jessica, and I need you in the office by 10. We have some fires to put out. Can't David handle it? I'm supposed to meet with the architect about the penthouse redesign. Victor. Charles let the silence stretch, employing the tone that had cowed business rivals and city officials. 10 a.m. Don't be late. He hung up before his son could respond, then turned back to the windows. The city glittered in the morning sun, beautiful and indifferent. Somewhere down there, problems were multiplying. Small ones, probably. The kind that cropped up in complex operations. Nothing he hadn't handled 1,000 times before. But the timing bothered him. The coordination bothered him more. Across town, in a modest office above a hardware store in Long Island City, Adrian Voss was 3 hours into his workday. His desk held 2 computer monitors, a notepad covered in precise handwriting, and a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He looked exactly like what he claimed to be, a construction project manager reviewing schedules and coordinating contractors. The paperwork in front of him supported that image: delivery schedules, permit applications, crew assignments. What wasn't visible was the second layer of his work, the real work, happening in encrypted files and secure communications that left no traces. His phone rang. Michael Chen. No relation to James, though the coincidence had proven useful over the years. Status? Adrian asked. Phase 1 complete. Every concrete supplier in the tri-state area has suddenly discovered urgent obligations to other projects. The ones who don't work with us regularly got very attractive offers from our shell companies. The ones who do work with us understand the situation. How long can we maintain the bottleneck? Indefinitely, if needed, but it'll get expensive after 2 weeks. We're essentially paying to keep concrete away from them. 2 weeks is fine. What about the permits? 3 projects flagged for review. The clerks involved are legitimate, no bribes, no coercion. We just made sure certain inconsistencies in the Hale applications got noticed. Things that were always there but nobody looked closely enough to catch. Because nobody was motivated to look, Adrian said quietly. Until now. Until now, Michael confirmed. The electrical contractors pulled out this morning, citing capacity issues. The union reps you met with last month were very understanding about redirecting their people to other projects. Adrian made a note on his pad. Financial pressure? The credit line inquiries started at 8:15. Nothing aggressive yet, just the banks doing due diligence on some unusual activity in the Hale accounts. Activity that doesn't actually exist, but their fraud detection algorithms don't know that. False positives? Very sophisticated false positives. By the time they sort it out, the damage to confidence will be done. Banks hate uncertainty. Good. What about the son? Michael's voice took on a note of satisfaction. Victor Hale had quite a night. The video from the gala is already circulating in certain circles. I made sure it reached 3 gossip bloggers and 2 investigative journalists. Nobody's published yet, but they're digging. Adrian's jaw tightened at the mention of the video. He'd watched it again this morning, forcing himself to see every detail. The casual cruelty, Elena's forced composure, the room's complicit silence. Don't push the video publicly yet, he said. I want them confused first, scared second, exposed last. Understood. Oh, and one more thing. The Times is working on a piece about commercial development patterns in Manhattan. Their real estate reporter has been asking questions about the Hale projects, specifically about labor practices and safety records. We didn't plant that story. No, but we made sure she had access to some interesting public records. The Hales have been cutting corners for years. They just always had enough influence to keep it quiet. Not anymore. Adrian closed the file in front of him. Keep the pressure steady. I want them feeling the squeeze but not understanding the source. Confusion is a weapon. They'll figure it out eventually. By then it won't matter. Adrian stood, stretching muscles stiff from hours of sitting. I have a site inspection in Queens. Keep me updated. He ended the call and gathered his things: hard hat, work boots, the worn jacket with Voss construction embroidered on the chest. The uniform of invisibility, carefully maintained over 15 years. Because Adrian Voss had learned something crucial early in his career. The people who built the city were treated like they were beneath the people who owned it. Contractors, workers, tradesmen, they were means to an end, interchangeable and forgettable, which meant nobody paid attention when they accumulated power of their own. The job site in Queens was a mixed-use development, 8 stories of retail and residential going up on a lot that had been vacant for a decade. Adrian's company held the general contract, coordinating the dozens of subcontractors and suppliers required for a project this size. He spent 2 hours walking the site, talking to crew leaders, checking progress against schedules. He knew most of these men and women by name, knew their families, their struggles, their pride in doing good work. He paid above union scale, maintained strict safety standards, and never asked them to cut corners. In return, they were loyal, absolutely loyal. Mr. Voss? One of the foremen, Danny Rodriguez, approached with a clipboard. Got a question about the electrical schedule. The supply order we placed last month, they're saying it might be delayed. How delayed? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Something about high demand. Adrian made a show of checking his notes. Let me make some calls. We might be able to source from a different supplier. I don't want this putting us behind schedule. Thanks, boss. Oh, and I heard something interesting this morning. Danny lowered his voice. My cousin works on the Hale project over in Williamsburg. They just got shut down. Permit issues or something. Whole crew sent home. That's unfortunate. Yeah, except my cousin says the Hales are terrible to work for. Always behind on payment, always pushing for faster work with less safety gear. He was hoping to get transferred to a different project anyway. Danny met Adrian's eyes with a knowing look. Funny how things work out sometimes. Very funny, Adrian agreed neutrally. If your cousin needs work, have him call our office. We can always use good electricians. I'll tell him, thanks, Mr. Voss. Adrian continued his inspection, maintaining the careful balance he'd perfected over the years. To the workers, he was a good boss, fair and reliable. To the building owners and developers he contracted with, he was competent but unremarkable, someone who delivered projects on time and under budget without demanding attention. Nobody suspected that the unassuming contractor coordinated a network of relationships that spanned the entire construction ecosystem of New York City. That he held strategic positions in suppliers, unions, permit facilitators, inspection services. That he'd spent 15 years building redundancies and leverage points, always careful, always quiet, always preparing for a moment he'd hoped would never come. The moment when someone hurt the one person who mattered more than all of it. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena. Working lunch shift at the museum today. Home by 6. Love you. He smiled, texted back. Love you too. See you tonight. She had no idea. Would never have approved if she'd known what he was doing. Elena believed in working within systems, in dignity through perseverance, in taking the high road. Adrian believed in balance, in consequences, in the idea that systems only worked if they protected the vulnerable, and when they didn't, someone had to correct them. He was very good at corrections. By noon, Charles Hale's morning had deteriorated from concerning to alarming. David Rothstein, his chief operating officer, sat across from him with 3 folders worth of bad news. Let me see if I have this straight, Charles said, his voice dangerously calm. 4 projects are experiencing supply delays. 3 have permit issues. 2 contractors have pulled out citing capacity problems. And the bank is asking questions about our credit utilization? That's correct, sir. All happening simultaneously? Within the past 12 hours, yes. David, in 40 years of business, I've never seen this level of coincidental problems. What aren't you telling me? David shifted uncomfortably. Sir, I've made dozens of calls this morning. The suppliers are apologetic but firm. The permit office is citing legitimate concerns. The contractors have documentation of their capacity issues. The bank is just doing routine due diligence. There's nothing routine about this. I agree. But I can't find a connection. These are all separate entities, separate systems. Someone's coordinating this. Charles stood, pacing behind his desk. Someone with enough reach to touch suppliers, permits, contractors, and banking simultaneously. Who have we pissed off recently? Sir, with respect, we piss people off constantly. That's the nature of development in Manhattan. But nobody has this kind of reach. This would require... David paused, calculating. This would require someone embedded in the construction ecosystem at multiple levels, someone with relationships across competing interests. A competitor? Our competitors are developers, same as us. They don't control the supply chain. Then who does? David had no answer. The silence stretched until Victor burst through the door, 40 minutes late and clearly hungover. Sorry, traffic was... What's wrong? You both look terrible. Sit down, Charles ordered. We're under attack. What? From who? That's what we're trying to determine. Charles turned to his son with an appraising look. Victor, think carefully. Have you done anything recently that might have created enemies? Offended someone with connections? Victor laughed, genuinely confused. Dad, I offend people every weekend. That's kind of my thing. You want me to list everyone I've been rude to? We'll be here all week. I'm serious. This is coordinated action against our company. Someone with significant resources and reach. Okay. Victor thought for a moment. There was that thing at the club last month with the Westchester crew, but that was just talk. And I might have screwed over Todd Chen on the Monaco bid, but he's not exactly The gala, David interrupted. Last night. Anything unusual happen? Victor shrugged. Same boring event, same boring people. I won the Monaco package, drank too much, came home. Why? Charles and David exchanged looks. The gala had been a Hale Properties sponsored event. If something had happened there. Nothing else? Charles pressed. No confrontations? No unusual conversations? Just the usual networking. Oh, and I had to put some waitress in her place. She got mouthy. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Explain, Charles said quietly. It was nothing. This server gave me attitude. I called her on it. End of story. What exactly did you do? Look, she was being unprofessional and I made a point. It's not a big deal. Victor. Charles's voice could have cut glass. What did you do? Something in his father's tone finally penetrated Victor's hangover haze. I poured a drink on her. It was just soda water, not like it was... You assaulted a service worker at a public event? Assault? Dad, come on, it was barely... Was anyone filming? David asked, already pulling out his phone. I don't know, maybe? There were cameras everywhere. David's fingers flew across his screen. 30 seconds later, his face went pale. Sir, you need to see this. He turned his phone toward Charles, who watched the video in absolute silence. Watched his son, drunk and arrogant, humiliate a young woman who'd done nothing wrong. Watched the crowd's reaction, or lack thereof. Watched the girl walk away with her dignity in tatters while Victor laughed. When it ended, Charles set the phone down very carefully. This is on the internet? His voice was unnaturally calm. It's been shared in some private circles. Food service worker groups, hospitality forums. Nothing mainstream yet, but it's spreading. How many views? Hard to say with private shares, but the original post has about 15,000. Jesus Christ, Charles breathed. He looked at his son with something approaching horror. Do you have any idea what you've done? It's just a video of... It's evidence of everything people hate about us. Charles's control finally cracked, his voice rising. It's every stereotype about wealthy, entitled bastards who treat people like garbage. Do you understand what happens when this goes viral? When the press picks it up? When our investors see their money associated with the rich kid who assaults waitresses for fun? Victor paled. I didn't assault... You poured a drink on someone's head in front of 400 witnesses. In what universe is that not assault? We can contain this, David said, though he sounded uncertain. Issue an apology, make a donation to hospitality worker charities, maybe reach out to the girl directly. No. Charles was thinking now, calculating damage control. An apology confirms guilt. We need to... His phone rang. He answered without checking the caller ID. What? Mr. Haley, this is Rebecca Chen from the New York Times. I'm working on a story about labor practices in the Manhattan development sector, and I'd love to get your comment on some allegations regarding... Charles hung up. The phone immediately rang again. Different number. Mr. Hale, Jason Brenner, Metro Daily News. We've received some interesting documents about safety violations on your... But he hung up again. They're circling, David said quietly. The video must have gotten their attention. This isn't about the video. Charles sat down heavily. The video is just an excuse. Someone's been feeding them information. Someone who knows where our vulnerabilities are. Who? I don't know, but they're using my idiot son's behavior as cover for something much larger. He looked at Victor with undisguised disgust. Get out of my sight. Don't talk to anyone. Don't post anything. Don't even breathe without clearing it with legal first. Dad, I cut out. Victor fled. Charles turned to David. I want a full audit of every project, every relationship, every potential exposure point. I want to know who's doing this and how they're doing it, and I want it by tomorrow morning. Sir, that's going to require... I don't care what it requires. Someone just declared war on us, and I intend to win. What Charles didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that the war was already over. He just hadn't realized he'd lost yet. By 5 p.m., the pressure had intensified. 2 more contractors had pulled out, citing vague concerns about alignment with company values. 3 investors had called requesting updates on project timelines, their voices carefully neutral but clearly concerned. The Times had published a preliminary piece about labor practices in development, with Hale Properties featured prominently in a sidebar about safety violations. The stock price of Hale's publicly traded subsidiary had dropped 4%. Small numbers, manageable damage, but trending in the wrong direction. Charles stood at his window again, watching the sun set over his kingdom, and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: uncertainty. Somewhere out there, an enemy was moving against him with precision and patience. Someone who understood his business intimately. Someone with resources and reach and careful planning. Someone who wanted more than money. This felt personal. His phone buzzed, a text from his head of security. Need to meet. Found something. Tonight. Charles typed back, my office, 7 p.m. He had 3 hours to figure out who was destroying his empire before it became irreversible. 3 hours to find leverage, to identify the enemy, to mount a counterattack. He'd built this company from nothing. Survived recessions, scandals, and competitions that would have broken weaker men. He wasn't about to lose it to some invisible adversary over his son's drunken stupidity. But as the sun disappeared behind the skyline and the city lights began to glow, Charles Hale felt the first genuine fear of his career. Because whoever was doing this wasn't making mistakes. And that meant they'd been planning for a very, very long time. Across the city, Elena finished her shift at the museum cafe, her feet aching from 6 hours of standing, her smile tired but genuine as she said goodbye to her coworkers. She'd worked 2 jobs for the past year, saving every dollar toward the dream of opening her own place someday. The gala felt like a distant memory now, pushed down where she kept all the indignities that came with service work. Forget and move forward. That was survival. She took the subway home, emerged into her neighborhood's familiar chaos, climbed the stairs to the apartment where Adrian would be waiting. He was in the kitchen, cooking something that smelled amazing, still wearing his work clothes. He looked up as she entered, his face lighting up in the quiet way that always made her feel seen. Hey, beautiful. How was your day? Long. She kicked off her shoes, crossed to him, wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. But better now. What are you making? Your favorite. Arroz con pollo, my grandmother's recipe. She smiled against his shoulder. You're too good to me. Impossible. He turned in her arms, kissed her forehead. You deserve good things, Elena. Don't ever forget that. Something in his voice made her look up, studying his face. There was intensity there, a fierce protectiveness she recognized but couldn't quite place. Adrian, is everything okay? Everything's perfect, he said, and kissed her before she could question further. They ate dinner at their small table, talking about nothing important, enjoying the simple comfort of each other's company. Elena had no idea that across the city, an empire was beginning to crumble. Had no idea that her husband had set forces in motion that would rewrite the power structures of Manhattan development. She was just happy to be home, safe, loved, and Adrian was content to let her believe that was enough. For now. Charles Hale's head of security arrived at 7 p.m. sharp, carrying a tablet and wearing the expression of a man who'd discovered something he wished he hadn't. Marcus Levine had worked corporate security for 20 years, and Charles trusted his discretion absolutely. "Show me," Charles said without preamble. Marcus set the tablet on the desk, pulled up a series of documents. "I started by looking at the supply chain disruptions, wanted to see if there was a pattern in which companies pulled out and when. That's where things got interesting." He pulled up a network diagram, dozens of companies connected by lines representing business relationships. "These are all the entities that have caused us problems in the past 48 hours. Suppliers, contractors, permit offices, even the bank inquiries. At first glance, they're completely unrelated. Different industries, different ownership structures, different geographical bases." "At first glance," Charles repeated. "What did you find at second glance?" "They all connect through intermediary relationships to a handful of shell companies. And those shell companies, when you trace them back far enough through the corporate registrations, all have one thing in common." Marcus highlighted several nodes on the network. "They're all linked, directly or indirectly, to the same person." "Who?" Marcus pulled up a photograph. A man in his late 30s, handsome in an understated way, wearing work clothes and a hard hat. The photo appeared to be from a construction site. Adrian Voss runs a mid-sized construction contracting firm based in Long Island City. On paper, he's completely unremarkable. Steady business, good reputation, nothing flashy. Does a lot of general contracting for mixed-use developments, mostly in Queens and Brooklyn. And Charles stared in the photo, searching for recognition. "I've never heard of him." "That's the thing, sir. Nobody has. He keeps a very low profile. But when you start digging into the construction ecosystem in New York, his name keeps appearing in unexpected places. He's got minority stakes in 3 major suppliers. He's on the board of 2 union pension funds. He has consulting relationships with 4 permit expediting firms. He's connected to the inspection services, the safety certification companies, the equipment rental agencies. That's not unusual for someone in construction. Networking is part of the business." "True. But the scope is unusual. And the timing." Marcus pulled up another document. "I found 17 instances in the past 5 years where Voss's companies or associates were involved in projects that experienced unexpected difficulties. Projects that were then acquired at discount by entities that, several steps removed, connect back to Voss." Charles leaned forward, his business instincts sharp despite his fatigue. "He's been doing this before, using his network to sabotage competitors, then swooping in to buy their assets. That's my theory. He's built a shadow empire inside the construction world. Nothing illegal, nothing that would show up in standard due diligence, but incredibly effective. He's like a spider sitting in the center of a web, controlling flows of materials and labor without anyone realizing it. And now he's turned that web against us. Why?" Marcus hesitated. "That's where it gets personal, sir. I pulled the guest list from the Vandermeer Gala, cross-referenced it with anyone who might have connections to Voss." He pulled up another photo, this one showing a young woman in a server's uniform. "Elena Cruz. She worked the gala as waitstaff. She's also married to Adrian Voss." The silence in the office was absolute. Charles felt something cold settle in his stomach. "The waitress Victor Humiliated." "Yes, sir." "You're telling me that my son poured a drink on the wife of a man who controls half the construction infrastructure in New York City?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you, sir." Charles sat down slowly, his mind racing through implications. This wasn't a business rival making a move. This wasn't even about money or market share. This was a man defending his wife's honor using tools Charles hadn't even known existed. "How much damage can he do?" "Sir, with respect, he's already doing it. Every delay, every permit issue, every contractor pulling out, that's all Voss. He's not attacking us directly because he doesn't need to. He's just making it impossible for us to operate, like turning off the oxygen without actually touching us. There has to be a vulnerability. Everyone has pressure points. I've been looking. His company is privately held, so no shareholders to pressure. He has no debt that I can find, no obvious financial leverage. His personal life is quiet, married, no kids, lives in a modest apartment in Astoria, no scandals, no vices, nothing we can use against him. What about his wife? If she's the trigger, maybe she's also the solution." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Sir, I don't think approaching her directly would be wise. From what I can tell, Voss keeps his professional life completely separate from his personal life. His wife probably has no idea what he's doing. Going after her would only make things worse. Charles stood, pacing again, his mind working through options. He'd built his empire through aggressive tactics and calculated risks, but this was different. This was an opponent who'd thought 3 moves ahead, who'd spent years building tools Charles couldn't match. What do we know about his network? Can we target his associates? Cut off his access? We could try, but it would take months to even map the full extent of his connections, and he'd see us coming. Plus, a lot of his relationships are legitimate business partnerships. If we start trying to pressure his associates, we look like the aggressors. We are not the aggressors here. No, sir, but that's not how it would play publicly, especially with that video circulating. Right now, the narrative is rich developers treating workers badly. If we start going after a small contractor and his wife, we confirm every negative stereotype. Charles slammed his hand on the desk, making Marcus jump. 40 years of building, of winning, of being the most powerful person in every room, and now he was being outmaneuvered by a contractor in work boots. Get me everything you can find on Adrian Voss. Everything. I want to know where he went to school, what he eats for breakfast, who he talks to, what he dreams about. There has to be something we can use. Yes, sir. And Marcus? Absolute discretion on this. If Voss realizes we've identified him, he might accelerate whatever timeline he's working on. Marcus gathered his tablet and stood. Sir, may I offer some advice? What? This man isn't a typical opponent. He's patient, thorough, and he's already won several exchanges without us even knowing we were fighting. Whatever we do next, we need to be very, very careful. After Marcus left, Charles stood alone in his office, staring at the photo of Adrian Voss on his computer screen. An ordinary-looking man in ordinary clothes on an ordinary job site. Except there was nothing ordinary about what he'd built or what he was doing. Charles picked up his phone, dialed his lawyer. Jim, I need you to look into something, quietly. There's a contractor named Adrian Voss, and I need to know if there's any legal action we can take against... Charles, before you finish that sentence, I need to tell you something. Jim Hendricks had been Charles's attorney for 15 years, and the concern in his voice was evident. I got a call this afternoon from the district attorney's office. They're opening an investigation into labor practices in the development sector. Specifically, they mentioned safety violations and wage theft allegations. Let me guess. They're looking at Hale Properties. Among others, but yes, they have documentation, a lot of it. Someone's been feeding them information. Voss? Who? Nothing. What's our exposure? Honestly, more than I'd like. You've pushed boundaries on safety requirements for years. We've always managed to stay technically legal, but if someone's highlighting every instance of borderline compliance, it doesn't look good. And if they find evidence of actual violations, there's no evidence because we haven't violated anything. Charles, you and I both know there's what's legal and what's defensible in court. This smells like someone's building a case, and they're being very methodical about it. Charles ended the call and pulled up the video of Victor again, forcing himself to watch. Really watch. Not as a father protecting his son, but as a businessman assessing damage. The optics were devastating. His son, representing the Hale name, publicly humiliating a service worker while a room full of Manhattan's elite watched and did nothing. It was everything people hated about wealth and power, captured in crystal clear high definition. And the woman at the center of it was married to the one person who could bring his empire down. Charles had made a career out of reading situations, anticipating moves, staying ahead of the game. But this time, he'd been playing checkers while his opponent played chess. The question now was whether he could salvage anything from the wreckage. The next morning brought fresh disasters. The Times published a full expose on labor practices in Manhattan development, with Hale Properties featured prominently. 3 projects were shut down pending safety inspections. 2 investors pulled their funding, citing reputational concerns. The stock price dropped another 6%. Victor stayed home, his social media account suspiciously silent for the first time in years. David arrived at Charles's office at 8 a.m. with more bad news. The concrete shortage is getting worse. I've contacted every supplier in the region. They're all either fully committed to other projects or quoting us prices triple the normal rate. Pay the premium. We need to keep moving. Sir, even if we pay, they can't deliver for weeks. The volume we need simply isn't available. It's like someone bought up all the supply and is sitting on it. That's exactly what someone did. Charles showed David the information Marcus had compiled on Adrian Voss. This is who's attacking us. David studied the documents, his expression growing darker. A contractor? How does a contractor have this kind of reach? By being smarter than us, by building relationships while we built buildings, by understanding that real power isn't about what you own, it's about what you control. So what do we do? Charles had spent the night considering options, discarding most of them as too risky or too slow. He was left with one approach he hated but couldn't avoid. We negotiate. With Voss? Sir, he's destroying us. Why would he negotiate? Because he's not trying to destroy us. If he wanted us bankrupt, he'd have gone harder, faster. This is measured, controlled. He's sending a message, which means there might be terms we can meet. What kind of terms? That's what we're going to find out. Set up a meeting, today if possible. Make it clear we want to resolve this directly. David looked skeptical, but nodded. I'll try. But Charles, if this man has been planning this for weeks, he's not going to just stop because we ask nicely. I'm not asking nicely. I'm offering him what he wants. Which is what? Justice, Charles said quietly. He thinks his wife was wronged, and he's right. She was. So we give him justice, whatever that looks like, and hopefully he lets us survive. Adrian received the meeting request at 10 a.m. while inspecting a foundation pour in Brooklyn. He read the message twice, then forwarded it to Michael Chen. They figured it out faster than I expected, Michael said when Adrian called. Took them less than 72 hours to connect the dots. Charles Hale didn't build an empire by being stupid. What's our position? You tell me. You're the one driving this train. Adrian watched the concrete flowing into the forms, thick and gray and inexorable, filling every space it was given. Set the meeting for tomorrow, 3 p.m. Neutral location, somewhere public but private. Maybe the conference room at the Meridian Hotel. Are you going to tell Elena? No. The answer came quickly, firmly. She wouldn't want this. She'd tell me to stop, to let it go, but some things can't be let go. Adrian, you know I support what you're doing, but at some point she's going to find out. When the Hales make their public apology, when the story breaks about why this happened, she'll connect the pieces. By then it will be done. She can be angry at me for protecting her, but at least she'll have her dignity back. That's a hell of a gamble. It's the only one I've got. Adrian ended the call and returned his attention to the pour, watching as tons of concrete filled the foundation, creating the base upon which everything else would rest. Foundations mattered. They were invisible once the building went up, but without them, everything collapsed. He'd spent 15 years building foundations. Now he was going to teach the Hales what happened when you ignored them. The Meridian Hotel conference room was elegant and discreet, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. A table that could seat 12 but held only 4 chairs today. Adrian arrived 10 minutes early, wearing the same work clothes he'd worn to the Brooklyn site, making a statement through his refusal to dress up for this meeting. Michael Chen sat beside him, notepad ready, expression professionally neutral. Charles Hale arrived precisely on time, accompanied by David Rothstein. Both wore suits that cost more than Adrian's monthly mortgage. Both looked like men who hadn't slept well in days. They sat across from each other, 2 different versions of power examining each other across polished wood. Charles spoke first. Mr. Voss, thank you for agreeing to meet. I haven't agreed to anything except a conversation, Adrian replied. His voice was calm, measured, with none of the deference Charles was used to hearing from people in work clothes. Fair enough. Then let me be direct. You've spent the past week systematically dismantling my company's ability to operate. You've targeted our supply chains, our permits, our contractors, and our public reputation. You've done it with impressive precision and efficiency. I'm here to ask why and what it would take to stop. You know why. I know my son behaved badly at a charity event. I know he humiliated a service worker who happened to be your wife. I know that was wrong, and I'm prepared to make amends. Are you? Adrian leaned forward slightly. Because from where I sit, you're not sorry your son poured soda water on my wife's head. You're sorry I have the power to make you pay for it. There's a difference. Charles's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. I can't change what Victor did, but I can ensure it doesn't happen again, and I can provide appropriate compensation. Compensation. Adrian let the word hang in the air. You think money fixes this? Money fixes most things in my experience. That's the problem. Adrian pulled out his phone, pulled up the video, set it on the table facing Charles. Watch it again, really watch it. Charles didn't want to, but he did. Watched his son's casual cruelty, Elena's forced composure, the crowd's complicit silence. 400 people, Adrian said quietly. 400 of Manhattan's most powerful citizens, and not one of them said a word. Not one of them told your son to stop. They just watched. Some of them laughed. My wife stood there, dripping with soda water and humiliation, and the entire room decided she didn't matter enough to defend. I understand you're angry. I'm not angry, Mr. Hale. I'm disappointed. See, I've spent 15 years in this city, building things, working alongside men and women who do the actual labor that makes your developments possible. And I've watched people like you and your son treat them like they're invisible, like they're tools you use and discard, like their dignity doesn't matter because they don't have the right last name or enough zeros in their bank account. That's not... Let me finish. Adrian's voice didn't rise, but something in his tone made Charles stop. I built my network quietly because I understood something you didn't. The people who actually make this city work, the contractors, the suppliers, the workers, the inspectors, they remember how they're treated. And when someone treats them with respect, pays them fairly, keeps them safe, they remember that too. They become loyal. Not because of money, though I pay well, but because of dignity. What do you want? I want you to understand what you've done. Not just to my wife, but to every person your family has treated as less than human. I want you to feel what it's like to be powerless, to have everything you've built threatened by someone who sees you as insignificant. I want you to know that your wealth and your name don't make you untouchable. Charles took a breath, visibly working to control his temper. You've made your point. I feel it. Every delayed project, every lost investor, every news story, I feel it. Now tell me your terms. Adrian glanced at Michael, who pulled out a document and slid it across the table. These are non-negotiable, Adrian said. First, a public apology. Not from your lawyers or your PR team. From Victor himself, naming my wife specifically, acknowledging what he did and why it was wrong. And from you, acknowledging that your company's culture enabled that behavior. Charles's face darkened. A public apology would be admitting liability. It would open us up to lawsuits. I don't care about your legal concerns. That's term one. What else? Second, you establish a foundation for service workers' rights and dignity. Fund it with $50 million. It will provide legal assistance, education, and support for hospitality and construction workers who face abuse or exploitation. My wife will be on the board, if she chooses. It will be named after her mother, who spent 40 years cleaning houses for people who never bothered to learn her name. David pulled out a calculator, started running numbers. Charles just stared at Adrian. Third, Adrian continued, you implement real labor protections across all Hale properties, union wages, safety standards that exceed city requirements, respectful treatment protocols, and you submit to quarterly audits by an independent organization that I will help establish. You're asking me to restructure my entire business model. I'm asking you to treat people like they matter. And if I refuse? Adrian leaned back, his expression unchanged. Then the concrete shortage continues. The permit issues multiply. Your investors keep pulling out. The DA's investigation finds all those borderline safety violations you thought nobody noticed. The bank gets nervous about your credit lines. Your competitors sense weakness and circle. And in 6 months, maybe a year, Hale Properties doesn't exist anymore. You can't maintain this pressure indefinitely. It's costing you money too. I can maintain it longer than you can survive it. I built my network over 15 years, Mr. Hale. I'm not overextended. I'm not leveraged. I don't have shareholders demanding quarterly returns. I have patience, resources, and absolutely nothing to lose except my respect for myself if I let what happened to my wife go unanswered. The silence stretched. Charles looked at David, who was still running calculations, his expression grim. These terms would cost us hundreds of millions, Charles said finally. Less than bankruptcy would cost you. They would fundamentally change how we do business. That's the point. Charles stood, walked to the window, stared out at Central Park. 40 years of building, of winning, of being the most powerful person in every room. And now, this. If I agree to these terms, he said without turning, you stop. Immediately. All of it. I stop the active pressure, yes. The concrete flows again. The permits clear. Your contractors return. The bank inquiries disappear. But understand something, Mr. Hale. I'm not going away. I'll be watching. If your company slides back into old patterns, if you start treating workers like they're disposable again, I'll know. And this will look gentle compared to what comes next. Charles turned back, his face a mask of controlled fury and grudging respect. You've got your deal. I want the terms in writing, with specifics on timeline and implementation. Michael will handle the details with your legal team, but the apology happens first. This week, public, specific, and genuine. Only after that do the other wheels start turning. My son is going to fight this. Your son is going to do exactly what you tell him, or he's going to watch the empire his grandfather built disappear because he couldn't control himself at a party. Adrian stood, buttoned his jacket. You have 48 hours to make the arrangements. After that, I start phase 2, and you really won't like what that looks like. He walked toward the door, Michael following. Voss? Charles's voice stopped him. Why didn't you just destroy us? You had the power. You could have bankrupted us completely, torn down everything my family built. Why offer terms? Adrian looked back, his expression softening slightly. Because my wife wouldn't want that. She believes in justice, not revenge. She believes people can change, can do better. I don't share her optimism about human nature, but I respect it. So you get one chance to prove her right. Don't waste it. He left Charles and David standing in the conference room, two powerful men suddenly aware of how fragile their power actually was. In the hallway, Michael exhaled slowly. That was intense. It needed to be. Adrian pulled out his phone, checked the time. How long until they agree? Charles will fight it for a day or so, try to negotiate better terms, but he'll agree. He's smart enough to know he's beaten. Good. Start drafting the implementation protocols. I want every detail nailed down before they have time to find loopholes. You really think they'll change? That this will actually make a difference? Adrian was quiet for a moment, thinking of Elena, of the workers he'd spent 15 years protecting, of every person who'd ever been treated as less than human by people who thought wealth made them gods. Maybe not. Probably not. But at least they'll know there are consequences. At least they'll understand that the people they ignore are watching, remembering, and sometimes, just sometimes, those people have more power than anyone realized. They walked out of the Meridian Hotel into the Manhattan afternoon, two men in work clothes who'd just moved an empire, and nobody on the street gave them a second glance, which was exactly how Adrian preferred it. Victor Hale stared at the script his father had handed him, reading the words for the third time as if repetition might change their meaning. They didn't. You can't be serious, he said, his voice hollow. You want me to publicly apologize? On camera? Using her name? I don't want you to do anything, Charles replied, his tone glacial. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., you will stand in front of cameras and read every word of that statement. You will mean it, or you will at least appear to mean it, and then you will disappear from public life for a very long time. This is insane. It was just a waitress. It was just... The slap came so fast, Victor didn't see it coming. His father had never hit him before, not once in 28 years. The shock was worse than the sting. That waitress, Charles said, his voice deadly quiet, is married to the man who currently has his hand around our company's throat. That waitress is the reason we're about to lose control of $3 billion in assets if we don't do exactly what he says. That waitress, Victor, is the most expensive mistake you've ever made. Victor touched his reddening cheek, stunned into silence. Your grandfather built this company from nothing, Charles continued. He worked 80-hour weeks for 40 years, sacrificed everything, so that we could have this life. And you nearly destroyed it all because you couldn't keep your entitled hands to yourself for one evening. I didn't know. That's the problem. You never know because you never think. You move through the world like it exists to serve you, like people are just props in your life. Well, congratulations, Victor. You finally met someone who won't tolerate it. David Rothstein stood near the door, silent and uncomfortable. He'd worked with Charles for 15 years and had never seen him this furious. "What if I refuse?" Victor asked, though his voice lacked conviction. "Then I cut you off, completely. No trust fund, no company position, no apartment, no credit cards. You'll find out what it's like to be invisible, to be someone nobody defends or cares about. Just like that woman felt when you poured soda water on her head." Victor looked at the statement again, his hands shaking slightly. "If I do this, if I apologize publicly, everyone will know. My friends, the media, everyone will see me as weak. Your friends are parasites who only care about your money. And as for being weak," Charles leaned forward, his eyes hard. "Weakness is bullying someone who can't fight back. Strength is admitting when you're wrong and trying to do better. You're about to learn the difference." The press conference was set for the following afternoon at the Hale Properties headquarters. By morning, word had leaked, and speculation ran wild across social media and news outlets. Rumors ranged from Victor announcing his retirement from public life to the company filing for bankruptcy. Nobody had guessed the truth. Elena knew nothing about any of it. She'd worked the breakfast shift at the museum cafe, come home exhausted, and fallen asleep on the couch while Adrian worked in his office. She'd been having nightmares about the gala, waking up with the phantom sensation of cold liquid running down her face, the echo of laughter in her ears. Adrian found her like that, curled up on the couch, her face troubled even in sleep. He draped a blanket over her carefully, brushed hair from her forehead, and felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came from loving someone this much. Tomorrow, she would know. Tomorrow, when Victor's apology went public and the story broke, she would piece together what he'd done. She would be angry probably, would tell him he shouldn't have, that it wasn't worth it, that she could handle her own battles. But she would also have something she didn't have before: acknowledgement, validation. The knowledge that what happened to her mattered, that it had consequences, that she wasn't invisible after all. He hoped that would be enough to earn her forgiveness. The Hale Properties building lobby had been transformed into a makeshift press room. Cameras lined the back wall, reporters filled 3 rows of chairs, and the air hummed with anticipation. Charles stood off to the side with David, watching Victor pace nervously near the podium. "He looks like he's going to be sick," David murmured. "Good," Charles replied. "Fear might make him take this seriously." At exactly 2 p.m., Victor approached the podium. The cameras flashed, recorders lifted, reporters leaned forward. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the moment. He unfolded the statement with shaking hands and began to read. "My name is Victor Hale, and I'm here today to address an incident that occurred at the Vandermeer Annual Charity Gala 1 week ago. Many of you have seen the video by now. For those who haven't, let me describe what I did." His voice wavered, but he continued, fighting through obvious discomfort. "I publicly humiliated a service worker named Elena Cruz by pouring soda water over her head. I did this because I was drunk, entitled, and believed that my family's wealth made me better than her. I was wrong, completely, indefensibly wrong." A reporter's hand shot up, but Charles shook his head sharply. This wasn't a Q&A session. This was a confession. Ms. Cruz was doing her job professionally and courteously. She did nothing to deserve my cruelty. I targeted her because I could, because I thought there would be no consequences, because I've spent my entire life being told that people like me don't have to answer for our actions. Victor looked up from the statement, and for the first time, something genuine flickered across his face. Shame. "I want to apologize directly to Elena Cruz. You deserved better. You deserved basic human dignity and respect, and instead you got humiliation from me and silence from everyone else in that room. I cannot undo what I did, but I can acknowledge it and commit to being better." He paused, gathering himself for the next part. "Effective immediately, I am stepping back from all public-facing roles at Hale Properties. I am also enrolling in a program focused on understanding privilege, empathy, and service. I will be working directly with hospitality worker organizations to better understand the experiences of people whose labor I've taken for granted my entire life." The reporters erupted with questions, but Victor stepped away from the podium. Charles moved forward to take his place. "I'm Charles Hale, and I want to add my own apology. What my son did reflects a culture we've allowed to exist, a culture where wealth is treated as permission to disrespect others. That changes today. He outlined the $50 million foundation, the new labor protections, the independent audits. With each announcement, the reporter's expressions shifted from skeptical to shocked to calculating the story angles. We've operated under the assumption that success justified certain practices, Charles continued, his words carefully scripted by lawyers but delivered with conviction born of necessity. We've prioritized profit over people, efficiency over dignity. Starting now, Hale Properties will demonstrate that it's possible to build successfully while treating every person involved with respect. The press conference lasted 45 minutes. By the time Charles and Victor left the building through a side entrance, the video of Victor's apology was already viral, trending across every social platform, dissected by think pieces and hot takes and genuine surprise that a member of Manhattan's elite had actually admitted wrongdoing. In the car, Victor sat in silence, staring at nothing. "How do you feel?" Charles asked, not unkindly. "Like my life just ended." "No. It just changed. There's a difference." Charles looked at his son with something approaching sympathy. "I know this is hard, but that woman's life changed too when you humiliated her. At least you get a chance to rebuild with resources and support. She had to keep working, keep smiling, keep surviving while carrying that shame. Think about that." Victor nodded slowly, and for the first time in his privileged life, he did. Elena was restocking coffee supplies at the museum cafe when her phone exploded with notifications, text messages, social media tags, missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages that made no sense. Sarah, her coworker from the catering company. "OMG, Elena, did you see Victor Hale's apology? He mentioned you by name. Marcus, the floor manager. You should watch this. I think you'll want to see it." Her friend Jenny, "Girl, you're all over the news. What happened?" With growing dread, Elena found a quiet corner and pulled up the first video link. Watched Victor Hale stand at a podium and speak her name. Watched him describe what he'd done. Watched him apologize. Watched the Hale family patriarch announce sweeping changes. Her vision blurred. The phone nearly slipped from her hands. This wasn't possible. This didn't happen. People like Victor Hale didn't apologize to people like her. Billionaire families didn't establish $50 million foundations because someone complained. The world didn't work this way. But the video was real. The news coverage was real. The foundation being established in her mother's name was real. And suddenly, Elena understood. She called Adrian, her hand shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. He answered on the first ring. "Elena, what did you do?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Silence, heavy and confirming. "Adrian, what did you do?" "Can we talk about this at home, please?" "No, tell me now, all of it." She heard him sigh, heard the weight of secrets being released. "I made sure there were consequences for what happened to you, for how they treated you. I made sure they understood that you matter." "How? How could you possibly—" She stopped, pieces clicking into place. The construction network he'd built, the connections he'd mentioned casually over the years but never elaborated on, the way contractors and suppliers spoke about him with unusual respect. "You've been lying to me," she said softly, "about what you do, about who you are." "I've never lied. I just didn't tell you everything." "That's the same thing." Her voice rose, drawing looks from nearby patrons. She lowered it to a harsh whisper. "You let me think you were just a project manager. You let me go to work every day thinking I was the breadwinner while you, what, controlled half the construction in New York?" "Elena, I'm coming home. Don't go anywhere. We need to talk." She hung up before he could respond, told her supervisor she had a family emergency, and walked out into the Manhattan afternoon with her mind reeling. The subway ride to Astoria passed in a blur. Other passengers were watching the apology on their phones, discussing it, dissecting it. Elena kept her head down, invisible again, but for entirely different reasons. When she burst into their apartment, Adrian was sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. He'd changed out of his work clothes into jeans and a t-shirt, looking like the man she'd married rather than whoever he'd apparently become. "Explain," she demanded. "Everything. Now." He did. Told her about the network he'd built over 15 years, about the leverage points in relationships, about the shell companies and strategic positions. Told her about seeing the video, about the cold fury that had consumed him, about the systematic dismantling of the Hale Empire. I spent a week destroying their business, he said quietly, cutting off supplies, freezing permits, turning their own infrastructure against them. I was prepared to bankrupt them completely if that's what it took. Elena sank into a chair, processing. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have stopped me. You would have said it wasn't worth it, that you could handle it, that making enemies of the Hales was dangerous, and you'd have been right. But I couldn't. His voice cracked slightly. I couldn't watch that video and do nothing. I couldn't let them think it was acceptable to treat you that way. So you took away my choice. You decided what I needed, what was right, without even asking me. Yes. The honesty of it, the lack of justification, made her pause. You're not even going to defend yourself? How could I? You're right. I made a unilateral decision about something that affected you directly. I went behind your back, used resources you didn't know I had, and set events in motion without your consent. He met her eyes, his expression open and vulnerable. I'd apologize, except I'm not sorry I did it. I'm only sorry I hurt you by keeping it secret. Elena stood, pacing the small kitchen, her emotions warring, anger at being kept in the dark, confusion about who she'd married, fear about what this meant for their future. But underneath it all, something else. Something she was almost ashamed to acknowledge. Relief. Because for the first time since that horrible night, she didn't feel invisible. Didn't feel like the humiliation would just be something she carried silently forever. Someone had seen her pain and decided it mattered enough to do something about it. The foundation in my mother's name, she said finally. Did you tell them to do that? I told them to establish a workers' rights foundation with you on the board if you chose. They chose the name. I think Charles Hale was trying to prove he understood the point. $50 million. $50 million, Adrian confirmed, and real labor protections across all their properties, and quarterly independent audits to ensure compliance. And your husband watching them for the rest of their corporate existence to make sure they don't backslide. Despite everything, Elena felt a ghost of a smile. You're insane. Possibly. You could have been caught. They could have fought back. This could have destroyed everything we've built. I know. And you did it anyway. I did it anyway. He stood, crossed to her, but didn't touch her, giving her space to choose. Elena, I've spent 15 years building power specifically so I could protect the people I love if I ever needed to. I never wanted to use it. I hoped I'd never have to. But when that moment came, when someone hurt you and the world just watched, I couldn't be the person who did nothing. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, seeing layers she hadn't known existed. The quiet contractor she'd married was also someone else entirely. Someone powerful and patient and capable of moving mountains when motivated. It should have scared her. Maybe it did, a little, but it also made her feel seen in a way she never had before. I'm still angry at you, she said finally. For the secrets. For making this decision without me. For assuming you knew what I needed. I understand. But I'm also, She paused, finding the right words. I watched that video of Victor's apology. Watched him say my name, admit what he did, face consequences for once in his privileged life. And I felt something I haven't felt since that night. What? Like I matter. Like I'm not just someone people can abuse without consequence. Like my dignity is worth defending. Tears welled in her eyes. I hate that I needed that validation. I hate that it took something this dramatic. But I can't pretend it doesn't mean something. Adrian reached for her hand tentatively. She let him take it. You've always mattered, he said softly. Long before Victor Hale apologized. Long before his father established foundations. Long before any of this. You matter because you're you. Because you're kind and strong and you treat people with dignity even when they don't deserve it. The world should have defended you that night. Since it didn't, I did. Elena pulled him into a hug, burying her face in his shoulder. We're going to have to talk about this more. About the secrets. About what else you haven't told me. About what this means for us going forward. I know. But right now, I just need you to hold me and let me feel whatever I'm feeling without judgment. He did, wrapping his arms around her, feeling her shake with emotions too complex to name, relief and anger and confusion and gratitude all mixed together. They stood like that for a long time, the afternoon sun slanting through their kitchen window, the sounds of the city distant and muffled. Two people who'd thought they knew each other completely, discovering new depths and complications and the strange alchemy that happens when love meets crisis. Finally, Elena pulled back, wiped her eyes. "Show me." "Show you what?" "Everything. The network, the companies, the leverage points. If I'm going to be married to someone this powerful, I should probably know what that actually means." Adrian hesitated. "Elena, some of this it's complicated. And frankly, the less you know, the safer you are if anyone ever—" "No?" Her voice was firm. "No more secrets. No more protecting me by keeping me in the dark. We're partners, Adrian. Equals. Which means I get to know who I married and what we're dealing with. All of it." He studied her face, saw the determination there, and nodded. "Okay. But fair warning, it's going to take a while to explain. I called out of work. We have time." He led her to his office, the room she rarely entered because it always seemed like boring construction paperwork. Now she saw it differently. The two monitors, the locked filing cabinets, the secure phone he kept separate from his regular cell. For the next 3 hours, Adrian walked her through 15 years of careful planning, showed her the network diagrams, explained the shell companies and strategic investments, detailed the relationships that gave him influence over New York's construction ecosystem. He showed her the files on the Hale takedown, the precision with which he'd orchestrated their problems, the terms he'd negotiated. Elena listened, asked questions, occasionally shook her head in disbelief. "This is what you do," she said when he finally finished. "Not just construction management. You're like, I don't even know what to call it, a shadow power broker?" "I prefer to think of myself as a very patient spider." "That's not comforting, Adrian." "No, I suppose it's not." He closed the files, turned to face her. "Look, I know this is a lot. I know you're probably questioning everything about our relationship now. But I need you to understand something. This—" He gestured at the monitors, the files, the evidence of his hidden empire. "This was never about power for power's sake. It was insurance, protection, a way to make sure that if someone powerful ever tried to hurt the people I love, I could fight back. And it worked. And it worked," he agreed. "The Hales are implementing real changes. The foundation will help thousands of workers. Victor Hale is facing actual consequences for his actions. And you got acknowledged. Your pain was taken seriously. That matters." Elena was quiet for a moment, processing everything. "What happens now?" "Now you decide what you want to do with this information. If you want me to walk away from it, to dismantle the network and just be a regular contractor, I will. If you want to be involved to help shape how we use this influence, we can do that too. If you want nothing to do with it but need me to keep it separate from our life, I'll respect that." You'd really give it up? All of it? For you? In a heartbeat." She believed him, could see in his eyes that he meant it absolutely, and that made the decision easier. "I don't want you to give it up," she said slowly. "What you built, it's powerful. It can do real good. Look at what happened with the Hales. They're actually changing their practices because someone finally had the power to make them. How many other companies need that same pressure?" "A lot of them." "Then we use it. Carefully, strategically, but we use it. Not for revenge or personal gain, but to create real accountability. To protect people who can't protect themselves." She took a breath. "But we do it together. No more unilateral decisions. No more secrets. We're partners in this." Adrian felt something tight in his chest loosen. "Partners." "Partners," she confirmed, "though I'm going to need time to process all of this. And we probably needed to have some serious conversations about trust and communication and boundaries. We absolutely do. But first," she pulled out her phone, pulled up the video of Victor's apology again. "First, I want to watch this one more time. And I want you to tell me exactly how terrified Charles Hale was when he realized what you'd done." Adrian smiled, a genuine expression of relief and love and shared understanding. He was very, very terrified. They watched the video together, Elena's hand in Adrian's, and for the first time since that horrible night at the gala, she felt whole again. Not because of the apology, though that mattered, not because of the foundation, though that was meaningful, but because she was no longer invisible. To the world, yes, but more importantly to herself. She mattered. Her dignity mattered. Her pain had consequences. And she was married to a man who'd moved heaven and earth to prove it. Outside their window, the city continued its relentless rhythm, millions of lives intersecting and diverging, power and powerlessness in constant flux. But in that small apartment in Astoria, two people sat together, holding hands, watching a billionaire apologize, and quietly revolutionizing what justice could look like when the invisible refused to stay hidden. The video ended. Elena set down her phone and looked at her husband. "I love you," she said, "even though you're completely insane and apparently run a secret construction empire." "I love you too," he replied, "even though you're probably going to make me overthink every decision now that you know about all this." "Good. You should overthink them. That's called accountability." "Is this what having a partner feels like?" "Get used to it." And despite everything, the secrets revealed, the trust rebuilt, the future uncertain, they both laughed. Because sometimes, in the middle of chaos and consequence, love finds a way to feel like home again. The video of Victor Hale's apology reached 10 million views within 48 hours. By the end of the week, it had become a cultural touchstone, dissected in think pieces and debated on talk shows, shared by worker advocacy groups, and discussed in business schools as a case study in corporate accountability. Elena watched it happen from an unexpected vantage point. The calls had started the morning after the press conference, journalists wanting interviews, advocacy organizations asking her to speak at events, even a literary agent suggesting she write a book about her experience. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing in 3 days. She sat at their kitchen table, scrolling through the requests, feeling overwhelmed and oddly disconnected from it all. This version of her story, the viral narrative, the symbol of speaking truth to power, felt both true and incomplete. The public saw a waitress who'd been wronged and a billionaire who'd apologized. They didn't see the invisible hand that had orchestrated everything, the patient spider who'd spent 15 years building his web. They didn't see Adrian, who was currently at a job site in Brooklyn, maintaining the fiction that he was just a contractor while quietly ensuring that Hale Properties followed through on every promise they'd made. "You're thinking too loud," Sarah said from across the table. Elena's former coworker had become an unexpected ally in navigating this strange new reality, helping her sort through the deluge of requests and opportunities. "I'm thinking about what to say," Elena replied. "Everyone wants a statement, wants to know how I feel, wants me to be the face of this movement, but I don't know if I want that." "You don't have to want it. You can just let the moment pass and go back to your life." "Can I, though? The museum already offered me a promotion. 2 restaurants have reached out about management positions. The foundation, my mother's foundation, wants me on the board. Everything's changed." "Isn't that what you wanted? A chance to move beyond serving drinks to people who don't see you?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "I wanted dignity. I wanted respect. I got that, but I also got something I didn't ask for, visibility. And I'm not sure how I feel about it." Her phone rang. An unknown number, but the area code was local. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Ms. Cruz, this is James Chen. I'm an attorney, and I represent several workers who've experienced treatment similar to what you endured. I was hoping we could discuss the foundation you'll be helping to establish. I have some ideas about how to maximize its impact." Elena put the call on speaker so Sarah could hear. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate your interest, but I'm still processing all of this. I haven't even officially joined the board yet. I understand, and I apologize for the intrusion, but I wanted you to know that what happened, what you endured, and what resulted from it has already started changing things." 3 other development companies have announced new labor protection policies in the past week. 2 hospitality groups have established harassment reporting systems. Your story is creating ripples. "It's not my story," Elena said quietly. "It's everyone's story. I just happen to be the one caught on camera." "Exactly. Which is why your voice matters so much. You're not just representing yourself. You're representing everyone who's been treated as invisible." After the call ended, Elena sat in silence, feeling the weight of expectations settling on her shoulders. Sarah reached across the table, squeezed her hand. "You don't have to save everyone, you know. You're allowed to just be Elena, not Elena the symbol." "I know, but what if I can help?" What if having this platform means I can actually change things for people like my mother, like the workers Adrian protects, like everyone who's ever been treated as less than human? Then you do it, but on your terms, not because everyone else expects it. Elena nodded slowly, an idea forming. I need to talk to Adrian. She found him that evening at the Brooklyn site, reviewing concrete pours with his crew. He looked up as she approached, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. Elena, what are you doing here? I wanted to see where you actually work. The real you, not the version you showed me. He introduced her to the crew, Danny, Miguel, Chen, workers whose names he knew, whose families he asked about, whose dignity he protected without fanfare. Elena watched how they interacted with him, the respect that went beyond employer and employee. These were people who'd follow Adrian anywhere because he'd proven he valued them. After the crew broke for the day, Adrian and Elena sat on a stack of lumber, watching the sun set over the Brooklyn skyline. I've been thinking about the foundation, Elena said, about what it could be, what it should be. Tell me. Everyone wants me to be the face of it, to give speeches and do interviews and be this symbol of worker empowerment. But that's not who I am. I'm not a public speaker or an activist. I'm just someone who knows what it's like to be invisible. You don't have to be anything you don't want to be. I know, but I do want to help, just not in the way everyone expects. She turned to face him. I want to build something like what you built, not the power structure. You can keep that. But the network, the connections, the system of protecting people. I want the foundation to be practical, not symbolic. Adrian's expression shifted to interest. What are you thinking? Legal support for workers who face abuse or discrimination, but also education programs teaching people their rights, partnerships with unions and advocacy groups, a reporting system that actually works, that doesn't punish people for speaking up. And most importantly, she paused, making sure he was listening, a fund to help workers transition out of toxic environments, so they don't have to choose between dignity and survival like I did that night. That's ambitious. I learned from someone ambitious. She smiled slightly. You spent 15 years building power to protect people. I want to spend the next 15 doing the same thing, just more visible. Let them see the foundation. Let them think that's where the power is. Meanwhile, you keep doing what you do in the shadows. We'd be working together. We'd be partners, Elena corrected. Like we should have been from the start. Adrian pulled her close, kissed her forehead. When did you get so strategic? I married a spider, remember? I'm learning. The first board meeting of the Elena Cruz Workers' Dignity Foundation took place 3 weeks after Victor's apology. The conference room Charles Hale had provided was elegant but not ostentatious, as if he was trying to prove he understood the assignment. Elena sat at the head of the table, flanked by James Chen, representatives from 3 major unions, 2 worker advocacy groups, and Sarah, who'd agreed to help manage day-to-day operations. Charles Hale sat at the far end, noticeably subdued, there to observe and provide resources, but not to control. Before we begin, Elena said, her voice steady despite her nerves, I want to establish some ground rules. This foundation exists to serve workers, not to make powerful people feel better about themselves. Every decision we make will be evaluated through one lens. Does it actually help people, or does it just look good? She saw Charles shift uncomfortably, but he nodded. Second, transparency. Our funding sources, our spending, our decision-making process, all of it will be public. Workers need to trust that we're legitimate, not just another PR exercise. James Chen spoke up. I've drafted some preliminary guidelines based on conversations with worker groups. The priorities they identified are legal support, education, and what they're calling escape funding, resources to help people leave toxic workplaces without falling into financial crisis. That aligns with what I was thinking, Elena said. Can we break into working groups? Legal support with James, education with the union reps, escape funding with Sarah and the advocacy groups? The meeting proceeded with surprising efficiency. Elena had worried she wouldn't know how to lead, but she found that her years of working in service, reading rooms, anticipating needs, coordinating complex logistics, had prepared her more than she'd realized. This was just a different kind of service, one where she got to set the terms. 3 hours later, they had preliminary frameworks for all 3 initiatives. Charles had remained quiet throughout, taking notes, occasionally answering questions about funding logistics. As the meeting adjourned, he approached Elena. "May I speak with you privately for a moment?" She nodded, and they stepped into an empty office. Charles closed the door, then seemed unsure how to begin. "Ms. Cruz, Elena is fine." "Elena, I wanted to say—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "What my son did to you was unconscionable, but what you're building from it, the way you're channeling this into something constructive rather than destructive, that shows character, I rarely see." "I'm not doing this for your approval, Mr. Hale." "I know. That's what makes it meaningful." He was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking a lot about the night of the gala, about the fact that I was in that room. I watched what Victor did, and while I was disgusted, I didn't intervene. I told myself it wasn't my responsibility, that someone else would handle it. But that's the problem, isn't it? Everyone thought someone else would step up, so no one did. That's usually how it works." "Well, it shouldn't, and I'm trying to do better." He pulled out a document, handed it to her. "This is a personal commitment, separate from the foundation. Every Hale property will now have worker advocates, independent third parties who report directly to an oversight board, not to management. Workers will have someone to turn to who isn't part of the power structure that might be harming them." Elena scanned the document, surprised by the specifics. "This is more than what was required in your agreement." "I know, but after watching you work today, seeing the thought and care you're putting into this, I realized that meeting minimum requirements isn't the same as actually changing. You're trying to change a culture. The least I can do is change mine." "Why?" Elena asked directly. "Is this guilt? Fear of what Adrian might do if you backslide? Or do you actually believe in what we're doing?" Charles met her eyes, and she saw something genuine there. "Honestly, all three. I'm not going to pretend I've had some moral awakening. I'm doing this partly because I have to, partly because I'm afraid of the consequences if I don't. But partly, and this is the part that surprised me, partly because you've shown me that it's possible to run a successful operation while treating people with dignity. And if you can do it with a fraction of my resources, I have no excuse not to." Elena considered this, then extended her hand. "Then let's see if you mean it." They shook, an accord between two people who'd started as victim and complicit bystander, now attempting something more complicated. Victor Hale's rehabilitation was quieter but no less profound. True to his word, he'd stepped away from public life and enrolled in a program working with hospitality and service workers. For the first time in his privileged life, he was learning their names, hearing their stories, understanding the human cost of his carelessness. 3 months after the apology, Elena received a request for a meeting from him. She almost declined, but curiosity won out. They met at a small cafe in Queens, far from the Manhattan social circles Victor used to frequent. He arrived on time, wearing jeans and a plain shirt, looking strangely ordinary without his usual designer armor. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, sitting across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," Elena admitted. "Why did you want to meet?" "To apologize in person. The press conference was necessary, but it was also scripted, required, coerced. I wanted you to hear me say it when there were no cameras, no leverage, no consequences beyond whether you believe me or not. So apologize." Victor took a breath. "What I did to you was cruel and inexcusable. I humiliated you because I could, because I'd never learned to see service workers as actual people with lives and dignity and value beyond their utility to me. I've spent the past 3 months working alongside people in the industry, and I'm ashamed that it took that long to understand what should have been obvious. You deserved better. They all deserve better. And I'm sorry." Elena studied him, looking for the smirk, the insincerity, the privileged boy playing at penance. She didn't see it. What she saw was someone genuinely uncomfortable with himself, struggling with a self-image that no longer fit. "Do you remember what you said that night?" she asked. "You said I needed to learn some respect. The irony being that I've had to show respect my entire life, to customers, to employers, to people who looked through me like I was furniture. You're the one who never learned it." "I know. Are you learning it now?" "I'm trying. I'm working shifts at restaurants, helping with catering events, doing the actual labor so I understand what it takes. And I'm learning that the people I dismissed my entire life are smarter, tougher, and more resilient than I'll ever be. They have to be. They don't have the luxury of coasting on family money. Elena was quiet for a moment. What do you want from me, Victor? Forgiveness? Absolution? I want you to know that you changed something. Not just the public apology or the foundation, though those matter. But you changed me. Every time I start to fall back into old patterns, I think about that night, about your face when I poured that drink, about how much damage I did in 15 seconds of cruelty, and I try to do better. Trying isn't enough. I know, but it's all I have right now. He pulled out a piece of paper, slid it across the table. This is a list of people I've wronged over the years. Service workers I humiliated, contractors I treated poorly, people whose names I never bothered to learn, but whose dignity I damaged. I'm going to each of them, apologizing, making amends where possible. You don't have to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that what you endured isn't being wasted. It's teaching me to be better. Elena looked at the list, dozens of names, some with notes about what he'd done, plans for restitution. It was thorough, uncomfortable, the kind of thing that couldn't be faked. I don't forgive you, she said finally. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did hurt in ways that don't just disappear because you apologize. I understand. But I appreciate this. The effort, the genuine attempt to change. That matters. Not as much as not being cruel in the first place, but it matters. Victor nodded, accepting the conditional acknowledgement. For what it's worth, the foundation you're building is incredible. I've been following the news, and the programs you're implementing are already making a difference. It's not about me. It's about creating systems that protect people so they don't have to rely on someone's husband bringing down an empire to get justice. Your husband, Victor paused. I assume you know what he did? How he orchestrated everything? I know. He terrified my father, and me. The precision, the patience, the absolute control he had over systems we thought we owned. It was like discovering we'd been living in someone else's house the whole time. Elena allowed herself a small smile. He's very thorough. He's very dangerous. Only to people who deserve it. Victor absorbed this, then stood. I won't take up more of your time. Thank you for meeting with me. And Elena, you were right to let your husband do what he did. People like my family only change when we're forced to. I hate that it's true, but it is. He left cash on the table for the coffee, too much, but Elena didn't correct him, and walked out into the Queen's afternoon, just another person on the street, learning to be invisible. Elena sat alone processing the conversation and pulled out her phone. Texted Adrian. Met with Victor. He's actually trying to change. Weird world we're living in. His response came quickly. Change is good. Vigilance is better. I'm still watching them. She smiled. Of course he was. 6 months after the gala, the foundation held its first public event, a job fair and resource center for hospitality and construction workers. The turnout exceeded expectations, hundreds of people flowing through the Queen's Community Center, where Elena and Sarah had coordinated booths offering legal consultations, skills training, and information about worker rights. Elena moved through the crowd, no longer invisible, but also not performing visibility. She was just herself, talking to people who'd experienced what she'd experienced, offering resources she wished had existed when she needed them. A young woman approached her, maybe 22, wearing a server's uniform. Miss Cruz, I just wanted to say thank you. I saw your video, and it made me realize I didn't have to accept being treated badly. I reported my manager for harassment, and because your foundation connected me with a lawyer, I actually had support. They fired him instead of me. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. That's what we're here for. You did the hard part, speaking up. We just made sure you didn't have to do it alone. It matters, the woman said, more than you know. As the event wound down, Elena found Adrian waiting near the exit. He'd stopped by earlier but had stayed in the background, letting her have the spotlight. How was it? He asked. Good. Really good. We helped a lot of people today. You helped a lot of people. This was your vision. Our vision, she corrected. I couldn't have built this without everything you taught me about patience, strategy, and using power responsibly. They walked out into the evening, hand in hand, navigating the familiar streets of their neighborhood. So much had changed in 6 months, yet so much remained the same. They still lived in the same apartment, still worked hard, still built their life together. One careful decision at a time. The difference was that now they did it as full partners, no secrets, no separate spheres. Elena understood the scope of Adrian's network, helped him decide when and how to use it. Adrian supported Elena's foundation work, providing resources and connections without taking over. They'd found balance. "I got a call today," Adrian said as they climbed the stairs to their apartment, "from a contractor in Chicago. Apparently word's gotten around about what happened with the Hales. He wanted advice on building similar accountability structures in his city. Are you going to help him?" "I'm thinking about it, but I wanted to run it by you first. If we start replicating this model in other cities, it becomes bigger than just protecting our immediate network. It becomes a movement." Elena unlocked their door, stepped into the familiar warmth of home. "Is that what you want, to scale this up?" "I want what you want. This was always about protecting the people I love. If that means just us and our community, I'm happy. If it means something bigger, I'm willing. You decide the scope." She thought about the young woman at the job fair, about the hundreds of others who'd found support through the foundation, about the workers in Chicago and beyond who might benefit from similar systems. "Let's start small," she said finally. "One more city, see if the model works elsewhere. But carefully, sustainably. We're not trying to save the world overnight. Just change it gradually." "Exactly." They made dinner together, sharing the small kitchen with practiced coordination. As they ate, Elena's phone buzzed with a message from Charles Hale. "The quarterly audit results are in. All properties in compliance, worker satisfaction scores up 23%. Thank you for holding us accountable. CH." She showed Adrian, who smiled. "He's learning." "He's scared of you," Elena corrected. "But fear that leads to good behavior is still good behavior." Spoken like someone who's been studying my playbook. "I have an excellent teacher." Later, as they settled on the couch, Elena reflected on the strange journey from that terrible night to this moment. The humiliation that had seemed unbearable had become a catalyst for change, not just for her, but for thousands of workers who now had resources and protection they'd lacked before. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Adrian. "What you did to the Hales? The risk you took?" "Never. Though I'm glad you're not too angry about the secrets anymore." "I'm still a little angry, but I understand why you did it, and I can't argue with the results." She snuggled closer to him. "Just promise me. No more unilateral decisions. We face everything together from now on." "Promise." They sat in comfortable silence, the television playing something neither of them was watching, both lost in their own thoughts about the future they were building together. Across the city, in a penthouse office, Charles Hale reviewed the same audit results he'd sent to Elena. The changes had been expensive, complicated, and initially resisted by his entire management team. But they were working. Worker retention was up, productivity was up, and most surprisingly, profits were up. Treating people with dignity was actually good business. He thought about the contractor in work boots who'd dismantled his empire in a week, who even now watched from the shadows, ready to act if Charles backslid. The fear was still there. He'd be a fool not to fear someone that powerful and patient. But increasingly, there was something else too. Respect, even gratitude. Because Adrian Voss had taught him something valuable, power without accountability was just tyranny waiting to collapse. Real power came from building systems that served everyone, not just the people at the top. Charles picked up his phone, considered calling Adrian directly, then decided against it. The spider preferred his web to remain invisible. But maybe someday, when enough time had passed, when trust had been rebuilt through consistent action, they could have a conversation as equals. For now, Charles would keep proving he'd learned the lesson, would keep implementing protections, maintaining standards, treating workers like the valuable humans they were. Not because he'd suddenly become a saint, but because he'd finally understood the alternative. In a small apartment near Columbia University, Victor Hale sat at his desk, reviewing his coursework for the hospitality management program he'd enrolled in. Next week, he'd start an internship at a worker advocacy organization, using his knowledge of the development industry to help identify exploitation patterns. He'd given up his trust fund access beyond basic living expenses, had moved out of his penthouse into student housing, had traded designer clothes for thrift store finds, and learned to budget like the people he used to dismiss. It was humbling, uncomfortable, necessary. His phone displayed a photo he'd made his lock screen, The frame from the video where Elena stood, dripping with soda water, her face carefully neutral. He looked at it every day, reminding himself of the harm he'd caused, the change he needed to maintain. Redemption wasn't a destination, he'd learned. It was a daily practice of being better than he'd been, helping where he'd hurt, building where he'd destroyed. He might never fully make up for who he'd been, but he could spend the rest of his life trying. The story that had started with casual cruelty and collective silence had become something else entirely. A testament to the power of accountability, the strength of partnership, and the possibility of change when consequences were real and consistently enforced. Elena Cruz was no longer invisible, not because she'd suddenly become someone different, but because the world had finally learned to see what had always been there, a person of worth, dignity, and quiet strength. Adrian Voss remained in the shadows, exactly where he preferred to be, his network of protection growing stronger, his commitment to defending the defenseless unwavering. Together, they'd built something remarkable from the wreckage of that terrible night. Not just a foundation or changed policies, but a living demonstration that power could be held accountable, that dignity mattered, and that sometimes the strongest foundations weren't made of concrete or steel. They were made of respect, built by people who refused to accept that cruelty should go unanswered, and maintained by the patient, careful work of those who understood that real change happened one decision at a time. The city continued its relentless rhythm, millions of lives intersecting and diverging, power and powerlessness in constant negotiation. But in one corner of that vast ecosystem, something had shifted permanently. The invisible had become visible. The powerless had found power. And the empire that had seemed untouchable had learned that everyone, eventually, has to answer for their actions. Not because of divine justice or karmic balance, but because someone cared enough to make sure they did. And that, in the end, made all the difference.